last 5 seconds. Not even.
Hey everybody, I was just telling Dan backstage, I was like, my intro is not as long as Michael's, so just brace yourself. And so here we are, 5 seconds later, not 2 minutes of law core or whatever. Yeah, anyway, can't really do it. I don't want to get a copyright strike for impersonating Michael's music there. But anyways, yeah, I got Dan from Inspiring Philosophy, and I am the dogmatic apologist. I only let my biases get in my way, and I cannot look accurately at the data, just like most apologists, correct? So what we're going to do here
You're also dishonest, right?
Yeah, we're also dishonest. Yeah, and so we're going to be really dishonest and talk about the census. The census. So what kind of provoked this was a few things. One, Dan, you probably remember we did that call-in live, and Robert Roll came in and challenged us on the census, and we had a really good conversation. In fact, very soon, Robert and I are going to be having a one-on-one conversation live here on my channel. We'll be talking about the historical reliability of the New Testament and all that kind of stuff. Robert is an atheist, so he's going to be talking about what some of the things that he read caused his doubts, and I'm going to tell him that he's a big dummy suppressing the truth and unrighteousness, and he needs to repent and get right with God. And so, but then also, I did a video response to a Muslim, and I talked about the census, and he did a response back and called me a big dummy while leaving out a whole bunch of mistakes. And just imagine the irony of like berating a Christian over a historical mistake in their holy text when you have I don't know, bazillion historical mistakes in your own, denying the crucifixion, saying that Jesus had some Muslim followers that were going to be successful until the day of resurrection and dominate, and we don't have like a single trace of any Muslim followers of Jesus for 500 years. We got crucifixions happening in ancient Egypt. We got Haman in Pharaoh's courts. We got Mary being the sister of Aaron and all kinds of other stuff. So the irony. And then I really thought about it, and I thought, a lot of these people are probably taking their cues from the scholars, which would mostly be like Bart Ehrman and Dan McClellan, who kind of popularizes a lot of Bart Ehrman arguments when it comes to the New Testament. And I mean, not that he comes up with his own arguments either, because he does, and he is a biblical scholar. And so TikTok's self-appointed corrector of apologists, letting us know how biased and dogmatic we are. But anyways, we're going to go through Dan's response to our mutual friend Michael's video on the census, because he brings out a lot of good objections that I think are just better articulated than probably most critics, I would say. And so, yeah, that's what we're doing. So I hope you like censuses, kids. I know that they're
going to be the sexiest stream you've ever listened to.
Yeah, it's going to be provocative and full of all kinds of drama and intrigue, I am sure. Nothing like what's going to be boring is watching David Wood, an apostate prophet, talking about Trump and Elon Musk having a divorce. I mean, so.
Yeah, I heard about that. I don't know what's going on, though.
If you want the real intrigue, guys, you have to tune in to the dogmatic apologist, myself, and only Thans here. So anyways, Than, you got any thoughts before we jump right into the video and start reviewing?
I mean,
any thoughts on the video overall?
Yeah, I mean, it's just, to me, it was the typical Dan McClellan thing where I was listening to it and it just felt very, very, the video itself was just very highbrow and hand wavy about most of the stuff, rather than, and lots of appeals to consensus.
Consensus. It's not a Dan McClellan video if he doesn't say consensus at least once. So, and the fit for today's video is burrito. It's a cat and a burrito. So
the fit for today is a shirt that somebody made for me, and the Hebrew is backwards. So don't worry about that. It's a lifting shirt.
Well, when you're looking in the mirror, it reads right? No, it wouldn't.
Technically, no. Still,
no, it wouldn't. I'm just retarded, guys. So Dan, there's your clip. You already got us before we even started. But I just woke up.
Well, we're dealing with the New Testament. There's no Hebrew in it, so it's okay.
Yeah, I just woke up from a nap. There's my excuse. I really am a doofus after all. We've proved it right there. So, all right. Without further ado, it's not the first time I haven't embarrassed myself, and it won't be the last. We will jump into. It's going to just start off with Michael's video, and then you know what? Before we do that, he has a very short video where he talks about how Luke's census isn't historical, which he seems to recycle around every Christmas time because that's what you do.
That
right?
sounds about right.
Yeah, it's like Neil deGrasse Tyson when he's like, Santa Claus really can't travel around the earth in one day. Kids it's like they feel like that's what they got to do. So, but yeah, there was a clip that I wanted to watch and kind of react to set the stage a little bit.
Let's do it. I haven't watched it.
Yeah, it's nothing you haven't heard before. So I'm probably going to have to rewind a little bit. I forgot to rewind this one. So here we go. All right. Loading.
It's in Luke 2 that causes Joseph and Mary to travel to Bethlehem to be registered and taxed is not historical. Hey everybody, I'm Dan McClellan. I'm a scholar of the Bible and religion, and we see in the first 5 verses of Luke 2 the story about Caesar causing an empire-wide census to be held so the whole world could be taxed. And there was a requirement that everyone return to their ancestral hometown in order to register. And this causes Joseph and Mary to go down to Bethlehem so Jesus could be born in Bethlehem in agreement with Hebrew Bible prophecy.
All right. So right off the bat, that's his claim. Luke basically invented the census to get Jesus and Mary up to Bethlehem. So in compliance with Micah 5:2, Jesus fulfills that particular prophecy. So do you see any problems with that idea just right off the bat?
Are you asking me or are you asking the audience?
Hey, if you want to jump in, that's fine. But
yeah, I'm just pulling up Michael 5:2.
Michael 5:2. Yeah. David's wife, or is it Mikkel? I don't know.
Yeah. Anyways, so my first issue with Micah with this, is the fact that Micah doesn't seem like an explicitly messianic prophecy. So if Luke's going to make up a historical fact. If Luke's going to make up a historical fact in order to slam Jesus in a prophecy, why would he choose this one?
Well, for me, does Luke ever quote Micah 5:2?
No. Yeah, that's the other side of the coin. At least with Matthew, when they want to say Matthew invented the flight to Egypt, at least there's a passage that Matthew alludes to.
Yeah, I could see this sounding like a messianic prophecy. Out of you shall come forth to me the one who is the ruler in Israel, whose goings forth are from old, from everlasting. And so I could see it.
Yeah, I agree.
Being messianic for sure. But the thing is number one, does Luke ever even quote this particular passage and say, and this is to fulfill such and such prophecy? He doesn't even allude to it. He doesn't even so much mention it. He just mentions Bethlehem. That's it. Now, the biggest problem that I have with this whole idea, and this is where a lot of biblical scholars go with this, is they get this idea that Luke is inventing some facts. He's doing some kind of theological fiction, some kind of midrash in order to get the Holy Family up to Bethlehem. But this creating an empire-wide census where everybody, according to Dan at least, has to return to their ancestral homes is like using a steamroller to crack a peanut. It's the biggest overkill ever.
Yeah.
If Luke were ever inventing a story to force prophecy fulfillment, he could have just said that Jesus was born there. I don't know. Or he could have came up with a simpler story, like Joseph having some sort of inheritance there connected with his family or something. But instead, he's introducing a Roman census that he could easily be called out on if he does.
I was just going to say.
Yeah, there's legal procedures.
Facts don't make facts.
Yeah. It's legal procedures, political backstory that complicates the story. All these public kind of things, like this big public event that you would think people would be privy to and would be able to call them out on. And yet that seems so weird when he could just make up something kind of sly and something subtle, oh yeah, Joseph had received an inheritance there and he had to move there or something like that, where it would be a whole lot more difficult to prove. Instead, he gives this thing where he creates this elaborate fiction that could be easily called out as a hoax. And I don't see, and I want to be careful here because I don't want to make like a weak argument from silence. And so, but Julian the Apostate was a Roman emperor and was one of the biggest, harshest critics of Christianity. Now, granted, he is several centuries after Christianity was getting off the ground and everything else like that. He's after he's down the road a little bit, but like you think he would have access to the empire's historical archives, and yet he says nothing about it. We have Celsus, who was a huge critic of Christianity. You think that he would say something about it. And then you actually have Justin Martyr, who refers to the census and basically says, and you can appeal to the Roman archives if you want to. So he kind of puts out this bold claim. And so I don't know. It's just, to me, this is like the craziest, most heavy-handed plot device ever.
It's basically just an axiom in biblical scholarship, in my opinion. It's the ultimate get-out-of-jail-free card.
Yeah.
They just made this up for some theological reason. But on what evidence do we on what evidence do we posit that as a hypothesis, or the hypothesis that this was either even just a good faith error? Let's just say Luke is wrong, for sake of explanation here, just really quickly. Why is good faith error not on the table, but making stuff up to put Jesus in the prophecy is automatically put on the table?
Right.
I just don't understand.
Yeah, I don't understand. And it's ironic because Dan will later, as we'll see in the video, say that Mike is kind of just making assertions without evidence. And he's drawing, I would say, like reasonable implications. He's making reasonable inferences based on the data. It's historical reconstruction. And so when he does it in something that's reasonable, to put some things together that I think are reasonable, he gets called out on it for not having any evidence. But when Dan does it, it's just like, oh, well, that's just data over dogma.
That's scholarship.
That's the real scholarship. So yeah, that whole idea, you just have to watch at the whole scholarly bullying thing that kind of happens. And it especially comes out with Dan. Like, can assert these things with a high degree of confidence and give no evidence for it whatsoever and like call it good. But when you do just an inference and say, you know what, this is possible, it's like, no, where's your evidence? So it's a double standard.
Yeah.
Supposed biblical error. The census of Luke.
Anyway,
all right, let's see it.
We'll just let it play since it's already
Skeptics
going.
will usually assert 4 problems. 1. In a Roman census, Joseph would not have to travel to Bethlehem, but could register at his current residency, and Mary would not have to register at all. 2. No Roman census would have been conducted while Herod the Great ruled until 4 BC. 3. There was never a single census conducted of the entire Roman Empire. It was done in sections. And finally, Quirinius was not governor until 6 AD. Jesus was born while Herod the Great reigned, which lasted until 4 BC. Thus, it could not be the census of Quirinius, conducted from 6 to 7 AD. Let's answer these in reverse. Starting with the last one, we did a separate video on Quirinius, where we pointed out there was a lot of evidence in the works of Josephus that Josephus may have been the one who misdated this census, and it actually should be dated back to the time when Herod the Great was alive.
So that other video is almost 40 minutes long, and it makes the argument that it is plausible that Josephus misdated the census of Quirinius based on another argument that it's plausible that 2 different Judases mentioned by Josephus are actually the same Judas. Now, none of these arguments actually rise above mere plausibility, but a big problem with this is that there was already a legate in Syria who was there until after Herod died. So the attempt to move this census into Herod's lifetime is precluded by other data. So at best, this is a plausibility stacked on a plausibility. More likely, it is just an implausibility. And this argument has not convinced the majority of scholars.
All right.
Yeah. I got a few things to say here. I'm not really defending, by the way, just to be clear, I'm not going to be defending the argument that the paper that Mike made that video off of at large. I'm not going to do that here. I just want to gesture towards a few things again. So Dan, I put the transcript of what he said here.
Yep.
It's a raw transcript that I did not edit, by the way. So if like there's spelling errors or anything in there, it's the transcript's fault. I just don't want to edit stuff. That you get the point. So there's two basic objections that Dan makes, right? So one is that Rhodes, the author of the paper that Mike used, bases his reconstruction on a plausible identification of two Judases as one and another layer of plausible but not definitive arguments. And he sees this as stacking plausibilities, which thus presumably is going to weaken the case that Rhodes puts forth. The second objection is that Josephus explicitly names Varus as the legate of Syria until after Herod's death, which he argues directly contradicts the notion of Quirinius holding any sort of administrative authority or conducting a census during that same time period. Okay. With that in mind, well, first of all, Eric, do you think I interpreted Dan correctly there?
Yeah. No, I think you're good.
Okay. So first, I want to clarify Rhodes' argument. His case involves very intricate, like it's a very dense paper. If you guys have not read it or looked at it or watched Mike's video, so Dan is rhetorically, ironically, because Dan likes to use a lot of rhetoric accuses Christians of a lot of rhetoric when they're arguing. He rhetorically frames it as stacking plausibility. But Rhodes is specifically stating, and I quote, "This study, like those conducted by earlier scholars, will argue that the account which Josephus tells of the census conducted by Quirinius and the corresponding revolt by Judas the Galilean is actually a mistaken duplication, broadly speaking, of events which occurred much earlier." He's not just claiming that this is going to be a plausible thing. Rhodes is making a pretty strong claim here. He states that the first Judas in Antiquity 17 is Judas and Matthias attack Herod's eagle and symbol in the temple. The second Judas account is where Judas, the son of Hezekiah, revolts in Galilee around Sepphoris. The third Judas account, Judas revolts against the census taxation under Quirinius. And so I highlighted just a few key things here. And he's comparing these three accounts of Judas's. And what does Rhodes say about all these accounts? He says, if the three accounts reject the activity of the same Judas, what is that weird typo there? Sorry, that really confused me. I don't know why there's a 3 there. If the three accounts reject the activity, and if each account is accurate, the activity must have occurred before the death of Herod the Great, given that in the second account, Herod orders the execution of Judas. So in other words, he's pointing out a contradiction in the truthhood of all the accounts that Josephus is talking about, assuming that they're all the same Judas. That doesn't sound like stacking plausibilities, right?
No.
What about the second objection where Josephus explicitly names Varus, all that stuff? Well, guess what? Rhodes actually explicitly talks about this. Again, I'm not going to read this verbatim or defend this at large. The whole entire point is that this is his paper, and you can see that he's mentioning that Josephus never refers to Quirinius as the governor of Syria in the second highlighted section. And he makes an argument at large to talk about all of this. And that's just one page, by the way. Like, there's multiple pages of Rhodes talking about this. Again, I am not defending Rhodes's position here. All I'm doing is pointing out the fact that all Dan has done is hand wave and gesture towards things rather than actually deal with the arguments.
Right.
Lastly, then, McClellan also points that this hasn't persuaded most scholars. I will quote Rhodes again. This study will challenge the consensus. Unlike most recent attempts, this study will directly challenge the plausibility of the consensus itself. So I'm bringing all that up just to kind of showcase the fact that, like, all Dan did there was do a giant hand wave.
Yeah.
Instead of like really dealing with the arguments that have been put up.
You wonder.
Welcome to
Like,
that talk. Thank you.
yeah. No, I mean, I wonder, like, did he go back and did he read the paper? Or was he
I don't
just
know.
going off of Michael's video?
I don't know.
It kind of makes me wonder a little bit from that. I don't want to judge either way.
Yeah, I'm not going to make any judgment calls there.
Yeah, but it is kind of strange. It's definitely extremely hand wavy, but that is what we've seen time and time and again from Dan. And it's not like this is some sort of conservative apologist who's writing this particular paper, and so it's kind of a strange thing to. It's not as if Dan doesn't argue against the consensus in other areas in his life. I mean, I think there is at least probably one area or two where, like, I think some of his Christology, I don't think that's just 100% consensus. He argues for Jesus's own, like the gospel's understanding of who Jesus.
It's the consensus of the real scholars.
Yeah, and so it's just kind of strange. He says that there was already a legate in Syria who was in office after Herod died. So trying to move the census earlier into Herod's lifetime, he said, is blocked by other data. But this is something that's going to probably come up again later, but I guess we could kind of address it now.
Yeah, we can address that now.
The Greek word, it's a verb form of hegemon. You're the Greek guy, so I think it's hege.
I have to pull it up.
Yeah, I'm going to butcher it, I'm sure. But it's a verb form, which it simply means ruling or governing. I'm not going to claim that I speak Greek.
Can you say the word quick? Because I can't. Why isn't it not in my notes?
I will send it to you in a private chat real quick. Actually, I'll just put it in the chat. I don't care. There we go.
Where is it?
It's in the chat. Like chat, not our private chat or anything.
Oh, you got the transliteration?
Yeah.
I actually suck at reading transliteration.
Yes. Whatever.
Greek.
Look at the chat, everybody. It's a Greek word. So it's a verb form of hegemon, and it just simply means ruling or governing.
Oh, hegemonuntos.
Hegemonuntos. There we go. There we go. Opa. So it simply means ruling or governing. It does not require Quirinius to be the formal legate. If you look at the BDAG English lexicon, it notes that this means to function in a leadership capacity, govern, or rule, and can refer to either provincial governors or other officials of regional oversight. So Luke's usage here is actually fits for somebody like Quirinius, who likely exercised administrative authority in Syria before his formal appointment as a legate in AD 6. And in fact, Tacitus Annals 348 straight up mentions Quirinius as having served in Syria, showing that he had a presence there even earlier.
Yeah.
And so then I also mentioned Justin Martyr earlier. Around 150, Justin Martyr refers to the census under Quirinius. It even invites readers to consult the Roman archives. That's in First Apology 34, which again is a bold move to make. If those records didn't exist, why are you just throwing it out like there? Justin actually doesn't call Quirinius governor, but he uses a petropos, a term for a procurator or administrative official, which aligns perfectly with the same word that we. Don't ask me to say it. The verb form of hegemon. So
hegemonuntos.
Hegemonuntos. Opa.
To be fair, most American scholars don't say it the way I do too. They use the Erasmussen way of like saying it.
Do you ever see scholars who are like really like, oh, you dumb apologist, you don't know Greek, but then they like butcher the pronunciations themselves?
Well, they use the Erasmussen like way of articulating or like the phonetics. Yeah. And then for me, I'm just kind of like cringing because they're technically right if you use that phonetic, but me being, somebody that grew up speaking Greek and everything like that, I'm always like, oh gosh, you dang Americans.
Yeah. You Europeans are always judging us. But anyways, Yeah, it's broader in scope than Justin's usage, but they overlap in, I would say, a pretty significant way. I mean, the overlap is implying administrative authority. And so Luke is describing Quirinius's function, not his title, which is really what matters, right? And then Tertullian, writing around 200, says the census Joseph participated occurred under the governorship of Saturnius. This is it against Marci in 419. So when you put all the pieces together, it appears that Quirinius wasn't the top governor, but was definitely an official, possibly the procurator. And why wouldn't like somebody who has military experience, administrative experience, be in charge of running a census while Saturnius held the title? I don't see why this isn't something that could be like delegated to him or something like that. That's likely why Luke mentions Quirinius by name. He wasn't the one managing the census itself. And so yeah, like he's saying that's blocked by other data, but it's not. It's not at all. It's Quirinius was there, he was present, and he had considerable authority even at that time. So it's not like a crazy idea at all. Does that make sense? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't know if this is probative or not for your point either, but Luke also uses that same, like the best like English translation would probably be was governing or something like that.
Yeah.
He uses the same for Pilate as well.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. That's 100%. He uses it for several people in authority in Acts as well. So
yeah.
Yes, that's not the only times that he uses it. So cool. Don't have anything else? We could go to the next clip. All right, let me. Here we go.
The third issue can be resolved by looking at what Luke actually says. Harold Honer notes, Luke uses the present tense, indicating that Augustus ordered censuses to be taken regularly, rather than only one time. Thus, it is reasonable to believe that there was an order of a general census in the time of Augustus. Sir William Ramsay said, the decree of Augustus, which Luke mentions, is commonly interpreted as ordering that a single census should be held of the whole Roman world. This is not a correct interpretation of Luke's words. He uses the present tense, and he means that Augustus ordered enrollments to be regularly taken, according to the strict and proper usage of the present tense.
So in citing two different publications, this creator gives the illusion of widespread scholarly agreement. However, what they omit is that Honer only cites Ramsay, and Ramsay, writing in the late 1800s, doesn't cite anybody. Now, is this a possible sense of the present tense? Absolutely. There are a number of different ways the present tense could be used, and this is one possible sense. Are there any data that indicate we should give preference to this sense over any other? Absolutely not. So basically what we have is an apologetic assertion from the 1800s that is then repeated by somebody in the 20th century. That's not really strong evidence of anything.
So it's just apologetics.
What we have here is just an apologetic assertion that there is no evidence for what Mike is arguing.
Yeah, it's really annoying. So basically,
Michael, I mean, to be clear, Dan didn't cite anybody there either.
No, he didn't. But yeah, you know, it's an old argument so that it's bad. It's apologetics so that it's bad.
It's bad.
He cited two books. So obviously he's saying that basically consensus is on Michael's side. And he was just really trying to lie to you guys. And me, Dan, the biblical scholar, I'm going to put my superhero cape on and rescue you biblically illiterate masses, unwashed masses on TikTok, and let you know how big of a doofus Michael
From the rhetoric
Jones is.
of Mike.
Yeah, it's just it's really good stuff there. Clearly he's not saying Horner and Ramsay say this, and so therefore it's widespread agreement. That's just kind of crazy. And so but
we don't really even need this argument either.
no, we don't need this argument at all. What if we just granted it for the sake of argument that McClellan is right about Mike's sources? Like, so what? And so there's so many different things here. Do you want to jump in with anything before I unload
Not
on
really.
this
I mean,
nonsense?
Yeah, because to me, this isn't like really that big of a deal.
No, it's not. Like, let's just
Like,
say,
I'm fine just going like take it. That's fine.
yeah. Like, let's just grant it for the sake of argument. So, first, Dan's whole argument hinges on this: that there was only one census, and
Yeah.
it's got to be the one in 86. So Luke just got things confused. He's an idiot. He created something for theological motives. Checkmate apologist. But that runs into a big problem. So, number one, Luke anchors Jesus's birth in the reign of Herod the Great. If you read Luke 1:5, it talks about during the time of Herod, and then it talks about the whole narrative about John the Baptist's birth. And we know that Luke knows that Jesus and John the Baptist were born 6 months apart. So, like, come on, like, let's just read the text like somewhat charitably here.
Yeah.
Then in Luke 3:1, he says that Jesus starts his ministry. We could assume in 28 AD because of all the names that he lists of people who are ruling and around at the time, high priest and all that other kind of stuff. And then in 323, he says Jesus was about 30. And then in 537, Luke shows that he clearly knows about the 6 AD census. He references it in Acts 5:37. He has it's Gamaliel talking about Judas the Galilean, and he keeps it totally separate from the whole nativity timeline. So he's not confused. I mean, again, just do the math. If Luke was about 30 and the census is 6 AD, like, those numbers don't add up. Like, he wouldn't be 30 at that point, right? But he clearly sees the difference there. So now there's a few ways that we could like address this. Critics tend to get hung up on the Greek word in Luke 2:2. This was the first census, prote, when Quirinius was governing Syria. But scholars like N.T. Wright will argue that prote can also mean former or earlier, just like it does in John 1:15 and 15:8.
Yeah.
He uses the same kind of verbiage there. Just look up the verses. I'm not going to go through them all just for the sake of time, because the thing is with the whole census, it can be kind of dense and take a lot of time. But I will list a blog post. I will
You talking
publish
about
it.
N.T. Wright's argument?
Yeah. And so if Luke meant he says
You
that,
talking about just to be clear, the protigenome?
yeah, it could mean former or earlier. So he's referring to an earlier census. He's
Yeah,
not
so
saying the
the-
first census.
If the genome is the genitive of genomos,
Mhm.
which allows for proti to mean before.
Right.
Sorry, I'm getting dorky with the Greek there.
No, that's fine.
It's
you
important.
Are Greek. You are
So.
Greek, and it's important. And this is just one particular
Yeah.
interpretation, okay, that I'm giving. There are multiple ones that don't necessitate Luke making an error here. I'm just throwing out one.
So sorry, Eric, but like just for anybody that's like thinking we're making stuff up there too, like in John 1:15, you see another example of this. You see protos mu. Again, you have that Greek word protos with mu, the genitive, where protos means precedence again. So like this is a common thing you see.
Someone says Than knows Greek. I'm typing Than is Greek.
I am Greek, yes.
Just,
it was my first language. Now, to be clear, that doesn't mean that I knew biblical Greek right away.
Right.
Very different thing.
Yeah. And so, but yeah, this is one interpretation, but the whole point of this, and a lot of scholars have noticed this, and there are different ways that this can be cashed out.
Yes.
But if Luke just meant the well-known 680 census, why does he call it the first? That complicates the line for no reason, unless he's pointing to a lesser known earlier one. And so I'm just giving one possible explanation by N.T. Wright. We could go through others if we want. And all we got to do is just show that the disjunction is more probable than just Luke making stuff up, right?
Yeah.
Now, Dan at this point would probably fire back with, where's your data? Where's your data? Data over dogma. And so he would just say that we don't have outside records confirming such a census. But again, so what? The 86 one would have been the one remembered because it sparked a revolt.
Yeah.
And so a quieter one made earlier wouldn't probably be on Josephus's radar. And so you don't want to make an argument from silence and say there couldn't be an earlier census. Now, one interpretation is that when Luke in chapter 2, verse 2, says the whole world was to be registered. That's oikonomai. And I hope I'm not grating against your nerves with my
No, you're fine.
crappy pronunciation there. But that word often just means the land. That's the same word in Acts 11:28 when he talks about famine affecting Judea. He's not talking about a famine inflicting the entire world. He's just talking about Judea. That's just one possible explanation. Now, what Dan and I tend to agree, our model on how we would kind of cash out the data is we would propose that we do actually have records for such a census. Augustus himself said in the Deeds of Divine Augustus that he carried out 3 empire-wide censuses, the first one in 8 BC.
I can pull it up if you want here.
Yeah, go ahead.
You can keep talking.
Yeah, no, it's fine. And so, like, there are multiple, like, he flat out says it. And sure, those were for Roman citizens. And Dan's going to later argue that, like, well, this wouldn't apply. I mean, Michael already spelled it out. That this wouldn't apply to people who had under client kingdoms. But we're going to be able to address that in just a moment. I mean, that's not a problem
breaking stuff.
No, you're fine. Just break away, man. And so, yeah, like I was saying, those are for Roman citizens, but it proves that these operations were happening around the right time. And if you think about a Roman census, like, it's going to be staggered. It's not going to happen overnight. In the video that we were watching earlier, Dan's like has this idea that, like, everybody stop, put down everything that you're doing, go to your ancestral home and be registered for the census, as if like Rome is retarded. And like Luke is trying to tell us that Rome is retarded, even though he could easily be called out on this. And he's saying that everybody has to return to their ancestral home, stop working, and do that. And put a whole put the brakes on their whole Roman economy. Like, no, he's not saying that. That's an overreading. But the point is, it would have been staggered. And even Paul Meyer, a historian, notes that, like, there was a census in Gaul that took a whole 40 years to accomplish the full thing. So the idea that the census took, like, I don't know, 4 years to hit Judea isn't really that weird. And I think this is the census that he's probably referring to. So go ahead with the if you want to.
I was just showing it on screen so that way people could see, like, this not a made up source.
Yeah,
it's data.
Yep, absolutely. So, but we are apologists, so we just pull things out of our butt and lie all the time.
Doesn't he actually in the video say something about this or no?
I don't think that he does. He's just going to argue in a second here that this would never take place under a client king, and Herod was a client king. Yeah, and so we're going to address that in just a moment. So, do you have anything you want to add to that? I kind of you're really killing it. I'm just here to look pretty and say some Greek words. Greek, that's what we needed you for, Dan. Help me to, instead of going to the how to pronounce, with the guy who's like hegemonontos.
No, I mean, you pretty much said everything that there is to say that I can think of. Like, the only thing that he might just, he's going to say the client king thing, and then he might just do the typical, like, well, it just wouldn't make sense to do this kind of a thing. But I don't remember if he says this in that video.
Yeah, he will. He definitely does. So let's take some super chats here. Christian Killian, how do I explain how Matthew could have wrote the account of Jesus versus Satan in Matthew 4, the temptation? I'm presuming that's what he's referring to. If no one, including himself, was around to see it, also before Matthew knew him, I don't see why. If you experience something, and you told your disciples later about it, they can write it down. It's not really that mysterious. And so, dude, I've lost over 150 today. Let's make it 350. Yeah, let's do it. Dan's already shaving his head for $1,000. Apparently. So, I mean, if that's what I got to offer, then maybe we can do it. We can do it. Let's see. Christ is life again. No, I want to input my own assertions for no reason. Yes, because that is what we do. That's what we do. Better based. All right. Faith in question. Oh no. You could have just asked me this for free tomorrow live. Josephus records that Rome didn't impose a head tax on Judea until 6 CE. Before then, Herod's client kingdom sent tribute So how does Luke place Joseph in a Quirinian census years before Roman taxation began? We're going to answer that. So
Yeah.
we are going to answer that. So stay tuned. That's a good question, and I appreciate the super chat. That is, that's what we're gonna discuss. So, in fact, I think we might be discussing it right about meow.
Right meow. Are you kidding me, right meow?
Right about meow. Well, I don't know. This is like the how can Eric be cringier stream. We'll work on it. We'll work on it. This is why people are like, "Hey, Eric, why don't you do more lives? Why do you do voiceovers so much?" Well, now you guys are finding out.
Oh, speaking of voiceovers, guys.
Uh-oh.
Hey, Eric, is it working?
Oh gosh.
I'm sorry. Keep going.
Hit me with the data over dogma robot. Can you do that?
Data over dogma.
There we go.
There's a paid version of this, and I don't want to spend money.
No, nobody does. We need Anyway.
The next supposed issue assumes Augustus would not have conducted a census in vassal kingdoms like that of Herod the Great. But there aren't any good reasons to support this assumption. Herod was essentially a puppet king, and Rome could do what they wanted. Sabine Hubner highlights a passage from Tacitus where a census was conducted in a client kingdom, and because of it, Rome had to deal with a revolt. So this suggests Rome could, and did at times, conduct censuses in client kingdoms, and there was no reason to assume they could not have done something similar within the kingdom of Judea.
So this is some more rhetorical misdirection. This creator wants you to believe that this account describes Rome requiring a client kingdom to conduct a census, and there are absolutely no data whatsoever that indicate that.
Okay, so I'm gonna stop there. He's gonna make some more claims.
Yeah, we're gonna do the Tacitus thing here.
We're gonna do. I want to do the Josephus thing here real quick.
Let's do it.
Yeah. So, boom, skibbity. Give me 1 second.
What was it? Are you gonna do a professional skedaddling?
Professional rizzling. And so, yeah. There's a lot of different things here. So, first of all, Dan is doing what a lot of New Testament scholars do. That is like a really bad habit of biblical scholars, period.
A priori history.
And so you would think that there was some kind of Roman handbook called How to Govern Client Kingdoms with a big bold line in it that says, "Thou shalt never conduct a census under a client king." But we actually don't have anything like that. There's absolutely no law. There's no policy. There's no decree. It's just modern critics doing history from their armchair and acting like their guesswork is gospel. Yep. And even if we did have a Roman document saying censuses weren't allowed under client kings, which we don't, that still wouldn't settle it. I mean, just think about this for just a second. The Soviet Constitution promised religious freedoms, and they still threw Christians in gulags, okay? The U.S. Constitution protected freedom of assembly and still does, but like think about during COVID, like you couldn't hold a church service for like a really long time in like California and Illinois. And so the point is that governments don't always follow their own rules. And so Dan and other skeptics like this, who are making these assertions, they're just way, way, way too overconfident, right?
Mm-hmm.
The second thing, and then I'll let you jump in with the other part with.
Oh no, I'm good, bro. I'm just chilling. Yeah. I'm vibing.
Yeah, you got a vibe with a skibbity rizzler here. I don't know. I'm stuck with brain rot. I work with a bunch of part-time with a bunch of school-age kids, and so they're constantly like yelling.
I can tell.
Chicken jockey at me and stupid stuff. We actually tried to watch that movie for the first time, and I walked out. It was like, this is the worst movie I've ever seen in my entire life. Anyway, but the second issue, and if you if you have the source, then feel free to pull it up on the screen.
For Tacitus,
for Josephus. I'll say it and you'll know what I'm talking about. Herod, he wasn't doing his own thing at this time. He actually, near the end of his reign, Augustus demoted him. He wrote a nastygram to him saying that he would no longer treat him as a friend, Rex Socius, but as a subject, Rex Amicus. That's in Josephus Antiquities 1693. I don't know if that's in your big
Possibly.
stack of notes that you sent me there.
1693, you said?
Yeah.
I don't think it's in my notes. Let me see really quick.
Okay.
I can always just pull it up, though.
Yeah, you can pull it up. But the point being is that actually, and people look over this all the time. You know, I had the Muslim guy that was responding to me. He's like, "You doofus!" You know, he's like, this is his whole shtick. Like, he just has to yell and shout in order to make his point across. This would never happen because Rome or Judea didn't become a Roman colony until 6 AD. Come on, stupid! Like, how do you not know this? But again, Herod was not in good standing. So he might not have been able to have the authority to run his own things. He was demoted for all of his shenanigans. He was basically called a subject by Augustus himself in a strongly worded letter. He would have lost taxing authority, and Rome even made his people swear loyalty to Caesar. This is as in Antiquities 1742. They actually had to take a oath of loyalty.
Yeah, I have 17. I don't have 16.
You can pull up 1742.
Yeah, it's cool. Right here.
Yeah, that's fine. Source, trust me, bro. So, but the point is that Herod wasn't calling all the shots for a time. The idea that Rome couldn't have ordered a census under Herod just falls apart when you actually know the historical context. Yeah, there you go. So Caesar ordered all the men in the country to give their names, and there was this loyalty oath. And so he lost, again, just recapping, he lost the authority. He was demoted. He was no longer Augustus's friend. He was treated as a subject. There was a loyalty oath that was demanded. And so the whole idea that Rome would include Judea in this particular census is not far-fetched at all.
Yeah. I'm trying to find the 1693 passage you were talking about. What does it say?
Let me pull it up here.
Ow! Sorry.
Is that your shoulder again?
Yeah. For anybody wondering, I just have a really bad strained shoulder. So
yeah.
It's also part of the reason why I'm just kind of vibing right now.
No, that's all right. That's all right.
This one, however, the messengers were hasted away to sell us to Rome, informed him what had been done. As usual, aggravated everything. Nacellus had already insinuated himself to knowledge of Caesar. That one?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I can pull it up really quick.
Amicus Josephus.
This one?
I'm looking at my own Google here.
Ah! I broke it. This guy.
Yeah. Aha.
Wait,
and when they were forced to, yeah, I see it. And it says, and when they were forced to confess much, Caesar, without staying to hear for what reason he did it and how it was done, grew very angry and wrote to Herod sharply. The sum of his letter was this, that whereas if he was old, he would treat him as a friend, he would also use him as his subject. There you go.
Where is that?
It's in the bottom third.
Am I close?
Yeah, you're right there.
Oh, is this it?
You're highlighting it right now. Yep.
Okay, cool. I can't read, so
yeah.
Got it. Okay, so it's this passage. Okay, I will add that to my doc. I'll just put her, I guess, right here for now. Right. I'll come back to that later.
Yep.
To fix it.
All right. So I think that kind of deals with that. You didn't have anything you want to add on it, did you, Than?
Trying to think. Is the Tacitus 41:1 passage probative here?
I think you're thinking of 641. Is that right?
Yeah.
He's going to talk about that in just a second.
Oh, he does? Okay.
Yeah. I think he's...
That's where my mind was. I just forgot everything he says off the top of my head.
Yeah. Right. So we'll play it and he's going to talk about, because Michael brings it up and he's going to say why that's irrelevant.
Okay. The overwhelming, pretty much unilateral consensus of classicists who study this is that this census originated with the client king himself. He made the decision to conduct the census. He tried to conduct it in Roman fashion. When Rome does something, you don't say they did it in Roman fashion. You only say that of folks who are not Rome. And then this group rebelled, and it was only then that Rome had to become involved to send troops in to defend their client kingdom from this rebellion. This is not evidence in any way, shape, or form whatsoever that Rome compelled client kingdoms to conduct censuses. They didn't. There are no data that support the notion that they did, and appealing to this text is rhetorical misdirection.
So yeah, there you go. So
I guess
yeah,
I
he says
just
640. You're thinking of
Ouch.
641 is the one that you're
yeah
thinking of there.
641
Need
one.
to get
This
you
one.
some icy hot. Yeah.
This one right here.
Yep.
Yeah. So let's talk about the I can't pronounce this. Do you know how to pronounce this?
Not in any ways that don't sound embarrassing, but it's.
I just want you to say the word.
We were already talking about the Meneville Zut on the stream with Michael a couple days ago, so we saved the dirty talk for Michael's channel.
For the inspiring.
I think it's
philosophy.
I think it's actually Clete, but I could be wrong.
Kletai, whatever it is. Talks about the Kletai tribe in Roman Client Kingdom and
Yep.
Caligula. They were made to conform to Roman customs by declaring their property and meeting tax obligations in the king. Blah blah blah. You get the point. So, what exactly is Dan just hand waving this away or like?
So basically, he says because they said they tried to do it in the Roman fashion, that's a giveaway. Because when Rome does something, you don't call it Roman fashion. The phrase only applies to non-Romans mimicking Roman methods. And he's saying that's the consensus of scholars. I don't know where he's getting that. He's not proving that.
Yeah.
He's just asserting it. Then he says the rebellion
rhetorical
broke
misdirection.
out. It's rhetorical misdirection. But then he's saying that a rebellion broke out, and only then did Rome step in.
Yeah. Is this where this is where we can bring up this guy? Yeah.
He's going to say that that's irrelevant too, but we'll
okay. We'll save this. That's
fine. And so I would say his reading of the text is actually a little bit off. He claims that the census in Cilicia was the king's idea, not Rome's, because Tacitus says that it was done.
Yeah, but weren't they made to do it in Roman customs?
Well, yeah, he says that proves that it wasn't a Roman order, but that doesn't actually follow, because Tacitus says that the Clete
It says they were compelled in Roman fashion.
It says they're pressed to conform to Roman usage by submitting to a census and tribute. And when they revolted, Rome sent in legions to enforce it. But that only makes sense if the census was advancing Roman interests. He's saying that they just did it to be like, knock it off, you guys. But to me, it seems like they're doing it because the census advanced Rome's interests. If this was just a king kind of freestyling, it seems kind of strange to me, at least, that Rome is breaking out the military in order to defend it. And even if the initial order technically even did come from the king, it's still imperial pressure at work. Client kings didn't just decide spontaneously to implement Roman taxation policy. They did it to stay in good standing with the emperor. It's how Rome extended control without full annexation. And so to me, it just seems like Dan's reading of the text is off. Like it could go one way or the other. And he's being really dogmatic about the reading and saying, well, this is consensus, without appealing to any scholars that I know, giving any receipts whatsoever. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with reading it the way that I'm reading it. Tacitus gives us a clear case where Rome compelled census-like activity in a client kingdom, and they were ready to crush resistance when it hit. And so I don't see how that's rhetorical misdirection. It's just Roman history. And even if we grant Dan's point, he's still overlooking the fact of Herod's demoted status. He's still doing a priori history, and he's still deciding ahead of time, what Rome would do and what they would never do. And so he's just well, you had to have this source. It's okay, well, that's just not how we do history. So I don't know. That's kind of
I'm just I'm looking at different translations of this passage to see. They were compelled in Roman fashion. This sounds like this wasn't. Yeah, this doesn't sound. I haven't found any translation of this that would like support Dan's point that they just kind of like hunky dory decided to do it Roman fashion.
Yeah, it's
It
weird.
all sounds like they were like compelled or forced to do it in Roman fashion.
Yeah, and so he's trying to say that Tacitus here is like completely irrelevant. We don't need this data point. We have
other ones.
We have 2 other data points, and even if we didn't have any, it's just again a priori history. It's just like, well, I'm going to decide ahead of time what Rome would do and what they would never do, as if they had these rules that they had to like follow themselves. I don't know. It's just odd. It's for somebody who's like data over dogma, like this just seems like just dogmatic. Luke screwed up, and I'm going off of like
it's not possible. He's not biased.
Yeah, so he is basically Spock.
I saw a tweet from him the other day that said that he does not let his bias get in his scholarship.
Yeah, I'm sure that's true. Nobody, he is the only person on the face of the planet who has ever achieved that status of being completely 100% neutral.
Well, you see, Eric, I've been holding a secret from you. I am also one of those people that has zero bias when it comes to doing my work. So
that's right. Hey, all we got to do is just ask ChatGPT to like.
Hey, ChatGPT.
Yeah, ChatGPT is neutral. Like, Dan, just update your shtick, man. You know, like there you go. Lily J is lapping you right now. She's lapping you, Dan. All right. Let's see.
Roger Bagnell and Bruce Fryer note that throughout the reign of Augustus, there were 6 censuses conducted in Egypt. So Luke's suggestion that another one was conducted in Judea fits right in and would align with Augustus's desire to perform multiple censuses so he could have accurate records.
Egypt was not a client kingdom, and these censuses were for taxation purposes. Client kings were required to take care of taxation themselves, and as long as they were paying an adequate amount to the Roman Empire, they were left alone. And additionally, if there had been a census ordered of Judea while Herod was king, it would not have been Quirinius. It would have been Publius Quintilius Varus, who was the legate in Syria until after Herod's death.
Wait, who?
Publius Varus. King, it would not have been Quirinius. It would have been Publius Quintilius Varus.
Publius.
Look at that name. Publius Quintilius Varus. But no, like, think about it. Think about it. Okay, let's just say, for the sake of argument, that Luke made a mistake.
Yeah.
Quintilius Varus Quirinius. I'm not saying he did make a mistake. I'm just saying, like,
yeah, but
there are
Luke doesn't make
scholars.
Mistakes. The gospel authors made no mistakes, Eric. They only made up stuff.
Yeah, they only made up stuff.
Except for the places where they made mistakes, like about geography and stuff like that. Because presumably Dan wants to affirm those arguments.
Yeah, and so, I mean, let's just think about this for just a second. All right, let's just grant, for the sake of argument, like we just throw inerrancy out the window, or we have to adapt a different kind of form of inerrancy. I'm not saying that we have to do that here, but remember what Dan said at the beginning. Luke invented a census, an empire-wide census that required everybody across the entire Roman world that no one would ever think to call him out on to get Jesus to Bethlehem to fulfill a prophecy that Luke never quotes. And he uses Quirinius as the guy, and he gets confused, and it must have been Quirinius who did that census, because that's the only census that he knows. And he's saying here it's Quintilius Varus that would have done that. Okay. Quirinius, Quintilius. Like, let's just say he made a good faith error here. Not that he invented a census. He got some names mixed up. Let's just face it, names are hard. And when people have similar sounding names, they can do things like this and make basic mistakes like
an
this.
Uneducated Jew, because that's probably one of your arguments against traditional authorship.
Yeah. So it's just like, what are we doing here? You know, like he could have just said, okay, he got this screwed up. He thought it was Quirinius, but it was Quintilius Varus. And like, no, Dan can't do that. It's got to be these really thick, heavy theological motives that are driving Luke to invent a crazy census to get Jesus to Bethlehem when he could have just, like, I don't know, had Jesus born there in any other way that would have been like easier
was
to
the legate in
not
Syria
disprove.
until after Herod's
Whoa.
death.
What about the first?
So there, we'll stop there. What were you gonna say?
I thought I pressed play somehow. I was like, wait, what?
No, that was me. I was letting him finish up his thought. I just was
Sorry.
going back. So yeah. So basically, Dan, again, just to recap, Egypt wasn't a client kingdom. So what did Michael do? He appealed to the Papyrus London 904, which talks about a census where people had to go back to their ancestral homes to register. He's giving you a data point that actually, no, this isn't something crazy that Luke just made up. Like, people in Egypt, we also have record, did that too. And Dan's rebuttal is Egypt wasn't a client kingdom. Censuses were for taxation. Client kings handled their own taxation. As long as they paid up, Rome would have left them alone. And it wouldn't have been Quirinius. It would have been Varus, Quintilius Varus, who was a legate in Syria until after Herod's death. And so, yeah. Do you got any thoughts, Dan, before I jump in?
Not really.
Okay.
It's just, I'm going to sound like a broken record a lot because at the end of the day, it just feels really hand wavy.
Yeah, it's extremely hand wavy. Again, we're giving you like some kind of data, and he's like, that's not good enough. That actually doesn't count as data, right? And so I'm going to let my dogma tell you that that's not data. So now, Egypt versus Judea. True, Egypt wasn't a client kingdom. It was a Roman province, but that's exactly why we have more administrative records from there, like Papyrus London 904. The point isn't that Judea and Egypt were the same politically. The point is Roman bureaucratic practices were consistent across the empire. Just because Egypt preserved the paperwork, and by the way, Egypt, where do we get most of our papyrus? Like remains for like the Bible or Gnostic texts or anything else? They come from Egypt because it's dry there, and we tend to have a lot of texts from there. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so, but they preserved the paperwork. That doesn't mean that Judea was operating on a completely different logic. Bureaucracies reuse procedures, and the Egyptian census shows that ordering travel for enrollment wasn't some kind of fantasy. It was how Rome actually operated. And then again, there's the whole thing with Herod's status. We already went through that. We don't need to belabor that again. And again, as I already said, when he says it would have been Varus, not Quirinius, and that's true. Varus was the official legate during the final years of Herod, but Luke doesn't say Quirinius was the formal legate at that time. He says that it was a hegemon, which we already belabored already. It simply means ruling or governing. Quirinius was an important official in the region before 6 AD. He led military campaigns in Galatia and Cilicia during this time. Again, we talked about that from Tacitus Annals 348. We talked about that from Justin. We talked about that from Tertullian. There's nothing implausible at all about him overseeing a census in Syria, Judea before his formal governorship. And then, as I already said, if he confused Varus with Quirinius, that's not a fatal error. If Luke misremembered or had garbled tradition and he was confusing two similar Roman officials, it would mean that he's actually trying to report real history. He's not just inventing theology. That's just a real human level mistake. It's no evidence at all for him fabricating a census to get Jesus to fulfill prophecy. And that would still put Luke in the category of a historian, not some theologizing myth maker. So yeah, I just think there's all kinds of problems with what Dan is saying here. So
yeah. What does he say after this?
He's gonna say that he's gonna do more hand wavy stuff with something that Michael's gonna bring up. I'll let Michael drop.
Let the video do its thing.
Yeah, he's gonna talk about
First issue. Is it incorrect for Luke to record that Jews had to travel to their place of origin for a census? Well, first off, we need to note there are no sources to contradict Luke on this issue. So to say he is wrong because it is not confirmed elsewhere is to argue from silence.
No, it's an argument from reason because it is entirely irrational and implausible that the Roman Empire ground portions of its economy to a halt for weeks at a time to require that chunks of its population go spend money to travel to some other part of the empire so that they could be registered in their ancestral hometown for no reason at all. If you want to make the case that that happened, you need data to support it. And no, you can't prove it didn't happen is not that data.
Jews were tied to their
Oh boy.
Yeah. So yeah, it's an argument from reason. So he's saying that the Rome would have shut
Arguments
down.
from reason are actually in the philosophical class of arguments for theism, Dan.
That's right. That's right.
I'm just being a jerk.
Haven't you read Plantiga or whatever? I don't know. Who's the main guy who makes the argument from reason?
I don't remember
his name. He looks like Larry David from he looks like Larry David. I just remember that. So
I don't even know what Larry David looks like.
it's because you're not an old man like me, Than.
Who uses I don't know who uses the argument from
I'm trying to remember
that's
his
gonna bother me
name.
now.
He used to have a blog.
C.S. Lewis.
Well,
Really?
C.S. Lewis, but the main philosopher here. It's C.S. Lewis's Dangerous Idea. What's that guy's name? Victor Reppert. So last time I saw Victor Reppert, here. Let me
Yeah,
show
I'll
you.
take this down really quick here.
He kind of has the Larry David look there. So you could do the whole.
There you go. This looks
It's
like Bernie Sanders.
Yeah, Bernie Sanders looks like Larry David. It's just that simple. It's just that simple.
Oh man, that was funny.
No, he's a good guy. He's really nice. He's friends with the McGrews. I believe he is.
Oh, I know. I'm not saying anything bad about him. Just saying he looks like Bernie Sanders.
Yeah.
Okay, Dan's thing. It's an argument from reason. That thing. Does he bring up the Egyptian papyri in this video or no?
He does.
Okay.
He was
Do we want
just
to wait
referring
for
to
that,
it.
or do we want to?
No, he just hand waved it away. Michael brought it up, and he hand waved it away.
Wait, did that already happen? I missed it.
That just happened. You missed it. Is your shoulder hurting that much?
No, I just forgot. I got
I got a couple super chats. I can let you stretch.
No, I'm good. I just got so sidetracked by the Bernie Sanders thing that I like went through a time warp and forgot what happened.
Yeah.
So he just hand waves it and says like it just wouldn't happen.
He says it's implausible that the Roman Empire would shut down portions of its economy just to make people travel across the empire.
Okay, so
and so he's saying that like this whole papyrus thing, like he's saying it doesn't say that. Maybe he does get into it a little bit more. He does. It's in the very next clip. You're right.
okay, maybe
He
we should
didn't
wait
quite say
then.
it. Yeah, we can wait before we get into
Okay.
that. And so basically he's just saying that Rome wouldn't shut down parts of the empire just to let people travel to their ancestral towns, but that's actually a straw man. Luke never actually even says everyone migrated across the empire.
Yeah, no, he doesn't.
He says in Luke 2:3, if you want to pull that up real quick. I mean, let's just look at
Yeah,
it.
give me a sec. Oh wait, what am I doing? I can just pull up. I'll pull up my Bible software instead of just Googling the thing. Just give me a sec.
Yeah, no, you're good.
Ow, I twisted my neck too fast.
Oh, that's bad.
Uh,
I was on a 4.5-hour live stream with David Wood a few weeks ago, and my trap muscle started acting up, and I was like silent for half of the stream because I was in so much pain, and I didn't really want to say anything, but
yeah.
anyway.
Yeah, okay, so stop screen, present. Window, boom, boom. Okay, I will, don't worry, I can make this bigger.
I'm not going to touch that then. Don't just throw softballs at me like that.
I can make
Yeah.
it bigger.
Just, you know what else is big? Low taper fade.
Oh man. All right, can you see this?
No, I can't, but other people can. I
will make it bigger.
I don't have the best vision.
Yeah. All right. Well,
Is it
okay.
verse
The
3?
NRSV clearly just says all went to their own towns to be
Their own
registered.
towns. That's right. Their own towns, their own city. It says Joseph went to his own city, his own towns. Bethlehem, which would be Bethlehem for him. Now it's possible that he had some sort of legal or property ties, but he's acting like this is like some ancient genealogical mandate.
Yeah.
That like, oh yeah, you have to go back to your 1,000-year through your genealogy.
It's the same thing in the Greek too, by the way.
Yeah.
Poli. Oh wait, this is Matthew. Why is it Matthew? The heck?
I don't know. But anyways, no, it's fine. It's just an overreading of the text. That's all that I'm really trying to say. He's overreading it. It just says that they have to go.
Well, this is Luke. I don't know why.
Back to their own city.
Yeah.
And the mention of David explains why Bethlehem was his home base, not that Rome tracked his genealogy, right? It's
correct. And that Egyptian papyri thing too. We may as well just bring it up really quickly, I guess, because it's the same thing. I know you guys can't see this. That's totally fine. The whole entire point. But I have the Greek text here with the translation here, and you see the same thing kind of happening here, right? Census was by household having begun. It is essential that all those who are away from their nomes, which I'll explain what that is in a little bit, be summoned, return to their own hearths. The Greek word nome is just standard term for Egyptian districts, your hometown, where you live. Like, just same thing.
Yeah.
And like the fact that he just hand waves this away is kind of beyond me. That's all.
Yeah. Like, well, again, Craig Blomberg points out that Luke doesn't say that every Jew had to return to his tribal land going back 1,000 years. The phrase own city would be just place of birth, legal residence, or recent home. The Greek polis hetu, might be butchering that, is used this way throughout Scripture. We see it in Joshua 26, 1 Samuel 8:22, Ezra 2:1, Nehemiah 7:6, Matthew 9:1. Most Jews still lived near their ancestral towns, and local. They could have carried out the census according to different local traditions or something. We don't really know that for sure. Bethlehem may have been Joseph's legal or family seat. The census travel wasn't some crazy empire-wide mass exile. That's the whole point that I'm trying to make. He's just overreading the text. Now he's going to say the papyrus that you just read is completely pointless. Like, it has no apologetic value here whatsoever.
Families, and still considered to be under their fathers, more so than in other cultures.
So here this creator is constructing an argument that the biblical text is wrong to say that Joseph traveled to Bethlehem because he was of the house of David. Rather, the text should have said that Joseph traveled to Bethlehem because his father lived in Bethlehem and Joseph was still a part of his father's household. He was not independently living in Nazareth. He was just there for work or something. So we're ginning up scenarios that are not in evidence in order to allow us to skirt the data. So at the very best, this is just a slim plausibility. I would argue that this is something that's not impossible, but there are absolutely no data that support this ginned up scenario.
Where's the data that supports the fact that Luke made something up for a theological reason?
Right. Yeah, exactly. So, but again, I think he's just arguing against a version of Luke that doesn't exist. The papyrus shows that Rome did actually require people to travel for a census at times. That's exactly what Luke says happened. Dan says there's absolutely no data whatsoever that Joseph had a real connection to Bethlehem, but no reason to think his father lived there. He was still a part of his father's household or anything else like that. But that's a straw man built on his own rigid assumptions. Luke doesn't say Joseph went to his dad's house. He says Joseph went to his own city, which was Bethlehem, because he was of the house and lineage of David. But that's not the Roman justification.
Right.
It's Luke's explanation for why Bethlehem was Joseph's legal or ancestral cities. Maybe, and there's nothing wrong in historical reconstruction to say, well, maybe he had property ties there. We know that Jewish land laws weren't like ours under Levitical law. According to Leviticus 25, land stayed in the family. Even centuries later, Jewish families preserved tribal land identity. Genealogies were kept as official records. Josephus even says that they were stored in reference. We see that in Against Appian 130. And of course, they still had priests who would have had to been after the line of Aaron. So they would have to know their ancestral background. So if Joseph's family had land in Bethlehem, even if he was living in Galilee, that's where Rome would have counted him. He waves this off as just like some sort of speculation that Joseph had property in Bethlehem because he's just being really stiff and really modernist with his reading. And like, it seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Than, but it's like he's saying, well, there's just no evidence. This is speculation. Like as if there was going to be a paper trail for everything, even for like a couple of first century Judean peasants. But real historical reconstruction doesn't work like that. We just make educated inferences all the time, based on cultural context, legal norms, and patterns of evidence. And when we already have reasons to trust that Luke is a reliable historian, and I would argue that we have ample evidence, just see my streams or videos on Luke and the Book of Acts and different things like that, that we have reason to think like, okay, well, maybe we can make an inference here. We know that life in the ancient world was messy, and we're not going to have a deed with Joseph's name on it, but that doesn't mean that the narrative isn't grounded in reality. So yeah, like to me, it's like, well, what evidence is he expecting? And when you're doing historical reconstruction, you just make a reasonable inference. And that seems like pretty reasonable. And again, one last time, like he's not saying like Rome was forcing like that's Rome's interpretation. He's just saying that like that's the city. That's where Rome would have counted him. It's Luke's explanation for why Bethlehem was where he had to register. So I don't know. It just seems like a lot of overreading.
Yeah, that you kind of said everything that there is to say again. It's the typical like really wooden, stiff reading of the text that doesn't really even exist in the first place.
Yeah,
you see this even with like Ehrman a lot, like
and totally
all the time, and it's just. I think it was, Lydia recently even had a video come out on her channel that was really interesting. Like it was a series, like in one of the videos that she had, it was titled the rule of like first impressions or something like that.
Yeah, rigid rule of first impressions.
And that was a really good video for, I think, explaining the phenomena that's going on in a biblical scholarship. Because I think that's going to be one of those instances here.
Absolutely. I would agree 100%. So, all right, we are almost at the end. Actually, let's just read a couple of quick super chats. We don't just have a couple, so we'll get through those real quick. Good evening. What books do you guys recommend for the resurrection? I would say, and I'll let Dan speak for himself here, but we're both dirty maximalist, max data people. So we would probably make more of an argument for the reliability of the Gospels. And our approach would be two steps. One would be, once you can argue that the Gospels are written by people who are honest and knowledgeable and close up to the facts, then from there, there's only two explanations. Basically, what they're saying would go back to the original eyewitnesses, right? And so that's what they would have claimed. Now, it doesn't mean it happened. The Gospels are reliable. Therefore, the resurrection happened. We're just saying that if the Gospels are reliable, and they go back to what the original eyewitnesses claimed, then there's only two possible explanations for the resurrection. Either one, they were honestly mistaken or they were lying. But the kind of details that you find in the Gospels, them eating with Jesus, touching Jesus, having multisensory experiences with Jesus over a period of 40 days, seeing him ascend to heaven, having long conversations with him, all that other kind of stuff, is not something that they could be easily mistaken about. And the fact that we would argue for a high degree of reliability in the Book of Acts, which also shows that they were willing to suffer and risk their necks, and some of them were even killed for their claims. And they were making the these particular claims in Jerusalem, the city where Jesus was crucified, after a short period of time. And so they're unlikely to be lying. And so if you could just understand that basic thing, you really don't have to make you don't really need to write a book on an argument for the resurrection, because that takes like a minute or two to state.
Yeah.
But you just need, the controversial premise is that what the Gospels are go back to the claims of the original eyewitnesses. And so that's why we would recommend books more on like the reliability of the Gospels and different things like that. On that front, like if you're looking for something like beginner level, Testimonies to the Truth by Lydia McGrew is a really good one, as well as Who Wrote the Gospel, or not Who Wrote the Gospels. What is it called? The Peter J. Williams one. All of a sudden, I'm drawing a blank.
Can we trust the Gospels?
Can we trust the Gospels? And then Luke Vandewey's got a pretty good book called The Historical Tell.
Yeah.
And so those are three like kind of entry level ones. And there are a lot more. If you go to my blog is jesusalive.com, I have a whole list of recommendations. If you go to any of my videos, I put that blog post in the description, because people ask me all the time, like, what books do you recommend? So there you go.
Yeah. I take mostly the same approach that Eric does. It's just mine has a philosophical edge to it.
Mhm.
Believe it or not, I actually use the problem of evil to help us get to the resurrection as well. And with regards to books, I would highly recommend all the books that Eric kind of stated, and the approach that Eric stated, which is reliability of the Gospels, all that stuff. The thing that I kind of do, that I add into things, is actually kind of argue for a higher prior probability of the resurrection of Jesus. Because somebody might still say something like, okay, well, dead people stay dead. Like, no amount of testimonies can ever overcome that low prior blah, 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 blah. Which you can counter that really easily. And Eric and I have done that before. But I think we can even bolster the case even more through some of the other means. So I would highly recommend Lydia's books, Eric's channel in general, because he really focuses on gospel reliability. I'll have my books being published. Hopefully the first one will come out by the end of this year, and it's my book on theodicy. And in the end of the book, believe it or not, like even though the book is dedicated to the problem of evil, the conclusions at the end of the book are for something that I call suspiciously Christian-y, and a high prior probability for something suspiciously Christian-y, if that makes sense.
Based. So the resurrection is God's answer kind of to the problem of evil in a sense. Is that kind of part of it? Or at least part of the answer?
It's part of the answer, because what I'm doing is arguing that the type of world that we live in, given God's existence, is almost like if not an entailment, just highly expected. And that includes a prediction from theism to an incarnation, and a resurrection. I'm going to say at least something like a resurrection, because for anybody that is familiar with the way that I approach the problem of evil, I talk about something called the defeat condition. And what better way to like project that God incarnate will and has and will defeat death and suffering than by literally conquering the grave, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
So
very based.
That's the bird's eye view of it. You guys can look forward to that at some point. I have 2 papers I'm working on at the moment, so the book's taking a little break.
Yeah. No, that's cool. I know Swinburne takes kind of, so he does talk about the priors of like why God would become incarnate. Not so much with the problem of evil as well. I mean, a little bit.
I don't. Yeah,
like to show solidarity with our suffering.
Swin is really good, and then there's times where I'm just like, meh.
Yeah.
There's the places where he's not good at it, are the places where he's really not good at it. Like his modal epistemology and stuff like that is meh.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, I hope that helps, Aaron. Gives you the right direction there. Gabriel Valencia, Dan does not cite, quote, sources for claims about Rome. So yeah, like he's just like, Rome doesn't do this. Well, what's your source for that? Well, we have no record, so they didn't do it. okay.
Well, also just wouldn't make logistical sense
Yeah. Right.
on my reading of this text
On my reading of this particular text.
that I didn't argue for
Yeah, but it's just
or
the
cite
majority-
anybody on.
yeah. But apologists are just being apologists, doing apologisty things. I think we're getting to the end here. Let's see.
We can find a parallel in the neighboring territory of Egypt. A papyrus that dates to 104 AD states that the prefect of Egypt ordered Egyptians to return to their place of origin so the census could be carried out.
So this papyrus is talking about people who are temporarily away from their home for work. It's not talking about returning to an ancestral place of origin. And as I've already discussed, the notion that Joseph traveled to Bethlehem because his actual home was in Bethlehem and he was still a part of his father's household there is not supported by any data. It actually directly contradicts the text itself, which says the reason he went to Bethlehem is because he was of the lineage of the house of David.
Right, but again, that's not Rome's reason. That's just Luke explaining. So
I feel like we covered this, yeah.
Yeah, I think we kind of did, really. He just says that it's not relevant. Oh, there is one thing about it, real quick here. Let me pull up my notes. I hope you guys.
So yeah, just to be clear, Dan's. Wait, I'll just say this and tell me if I'm not responding to what Dan just said. Because this, I just think I just realized something. Luke doesn't say that Rome required the Davidic descent to be the basis for his travel, right?
He doesn't say it the way that Dan thinks that he's saying.
You're right.
He's giving Joseph's reason.
He said Joseph went because he was of the house, but it doesn't say Rome made him go because of that.
It's just saying that that's where, yeah. So
okay.
The papyrus refers to a temporary residence that he's talking about, like people traveling for work, not ancestral towns. But again, the theory that Joseph's real home was Bethlehem and that he was part of his father's household isn't supported by that. That's what he's saying. That's his claim. That it contradicts Luke. And so what I'm saying with this particular thing, like, first of all, like, I don't know how he's reading this, but it says for any reason whatsoever. He says it has to do with work. He says that it's just about temporary workers returning to their homes, not about legal census policy. But the actual text of Papyrus London 905, which is dated 104, says people must return to their homes for enrollment for any reason whatsoever. That's a legal directive covering all cases. It's not just laborers. I don't understand where he's getting this. This is for people who are working.
Yeah.
And then the purpose of the decree was registration, or was for census registration. That's the context in which the return is being ordered. So it does show that the census procedures involve returning to one's legal home base, wherever the reason is for being away. It doesn't matter if that home was your ancestral town in some tribal sense, or just where you had legal property or identity that was based there. And so in Josephus's case, Luke says that Bethlehem was his own city, not some mystical ancestral, dreamland or whatever. The Greek is consistent with legal home, resident, or origin, and that matches the kind of home referred to in Papyrus 904, a legal personal base being used for a census purpose. Again, Luke never says Rome made Joseph go to Bethlehem because of his Davidic bloodline. He says Joseph went because Bethlehem was his own city. The mention of David explains why Bethlehem was his home base, not that Rome was tracking the genealogy. So Dan's basically arguing against a version of Luke that doesn't even exist. It's just like his own, like, like you said earlier, like initial impressions of the text. At least that's my read of it. The papyrus shows that Rome did require people to travel for a census. And that's exactly what Luke says happened. So it's based on his own, like, rigid reading of the text that's like forces Michael into some sort of error here that's not really there, is my take of it.
Yeah, Joseph, like, I'm just reading the Greek, and there's nothing here that says that would imply anything.
Right.
That Rome, this was like a Roman thing.
Right. Now, I would say, I'll just interject this real quick here. Some people, I've seen this before in like some comments on different videos, that they might object that if Joseph had any family or property in Bethlehem, it would make no sense that he and Mary would end up placing Jesus in a manger because there was no room at the inn. And at first, that sounds kind of like that has some force. But to me, this misunderstands the text and the cultural setting. The word translated as inn is actually kataluma, which more accurately refers to a guest room in a private home, not a public inn. Kataluma is the same word used in Mark 14:14 to describe the upper room where Jesus and his disciples ate the Last Supper. When Luke actually refers to a public inn in the parable of the Good Samaritan, he uses a completely different word, Greek word. I believe it's pronounced pendokion. Given the census and the likelihood that other family members were already staying in the house, the guest room was likely full. In such cases, it was common for additional guests to stay in a lower level or attached area where animals might be kept. It doesn't even say that animals were like present when Jesus was being born. I think we think of that because of like Christmas plays and different things that we watched. But just these areas often had built-in mangers. And so maybe that's the rigid first impression that he's getting because of that. But yeah, so does that make
Yeah,
sense?
I'm just looking at my lexicon quick to see. Yeah, it could be a guest chamber, a lodging place, a breaking of a journey. Could be a lot of different things. The semantic range kind of
Yeah.
allows for.
So I mean, if you have a census and you have his family there, it's not really that implausible to think like, oh, okay, well, like this is where they would have had to go instead because of the situation. And so, um, yeah, again, it just seems like a lot of overreading is happening like over and over and over again because of like these first impressions and different things like that.
Yeah.
So, any other thoughts before we finish up with Dan here on this last?
No, I just
What?
went down a rabbit hole of like looking at usages of Petaluma and its cognates.
You're catalooing? Okay. I think it's just one line. We're not going to play the very last part because he just kind of summarizes and calls Michael a dummy, basically.
So there was nothing out of the ordinary by Luke recording that Joseph and Mary needed to travel to Bethlehem for the census, which is probably where Joseph's father resided.
So there are absolutely no data whatsoever that make it probable that Joseph's father lived in Bethlehem and that Joseph was still a part of his father's household and so traveled to Bethlehem because that was his actual home. That is brought up as a possibility, and then because that is the possibility that preserves the integrity and the historicity of the account, this creator then just asserts.
Okay. So, yeah, that's basically it. He's just saying that Michael is making an argument for possibility, but we really already covered that historical reconstruction requires us to make certain hypotheses, like what kind of, I love the drunk Dan pause face there. But like, what kind of data is he expecting for first century peasants? Like, if we have other reasons to trust Luke as a reliable historical source, and I would argue that we have ample evidence for that out of the book of Acts alone, not to mention lots of different data points that we can connect with real history with his gospel, and he gets things right over and over and over again. And like, real life is messy, censuses are messy, all of this kind of stuff is going to have some sort of like messiness to it. Then it's
Yeah.
okay. What is so weird about just kind of saying, okay, well, this would be one way that we could possibly explain the data. It's not like, again, we're not going to find some like title deed.
Which way?
Joseph's father, title deed. Here it is. We found it.
Yeah.
Like, what was
The
the
epistemology is just so whack because, like, at the end of the day, you're gonna just. What I care about the most is what model explains the data the best way in the most parsimonious way, with the least amount of baked-in assumptions that don't have any that are the least amount of ad hoc.
Right.
To me, it seems like the plausible models that we've put up are much more in line with those criteria than what Dan is saying.
Yeah, and again, he starts with the assumption that Luke is just inventing the most craziest scenario to fulfill a prophecy. So, anyways, all right. Look at these guys fighting in the comments. You bozos. Oops.
Bozos.
I banned a guy. I didn't mean to. I just meant to put him in a timeout. So they're just
Give him the ban hammer. Show no mercy.
Yeah, ban hammer. So I think that's it. I mean, there's not a whole lot else to go over. I'm looking for more. We have any other super chats? We just have Cooper.
Send in some more super chats for Eric.
Oh man, that just hurts. Hates. What is that? Auto tune? Is that what it's called? Oh man,
I don't even know, man. This voice changer is fun though.
Oh, I'm sure. So Koopa, thanks for the super chat. I hope it was a good stream. So yeah, again, at the end, there's no reason to throw all this strong doubt on Luke's, this whole census thing. There's plenty of reasons to think that it's historical. And a lot of just thinking that it's not is just looking at the text in a lot of different weird, rigid, forcing almost an error. And this is supposed to be like the skeptics, like big one. Like this one comes up over and over and over again. And when you actually look at it, it's like, it's not really that big of a deal. So it's not really that scary of a thing at all. So yeah. Any final thoughts,
No,
Stan?
I don't really have anything, man. I mean, I feel like this is just like another case in point example of like once you just kind of do the digging past the surface level scholarship that people put up, you realize that the case isn't really that strong for what the skeptical scholar wants to say.
Right.
Like, I always like to use the whole John versus synoptics on the dating of the crucifixion thing as a case example. Like, how ready are scholars ready to say that John moved the date of the crucifixion because they wanted to he wanted to present John wanted to present Jesus as the Passover lamb, but like just a really quick glance at the Greek even will just show that John agrees with the synoptics when John uses the Greek word botched.
Yeah.
Right?
It's actually
why bother look at the Greek when the prior probability of John making up facts is so high?
Yeah, that's basically what they start with. The prior is high, that they're just going to make something up for a theological reason. So now let's create a hypothesis for a mistake almost.
And then the same thing happens here. It's just, well, the prior's really high that Luke made this crazy thing up. So, who cares about any of this extra corroborating evidence?
Yeah, right. One last super chat, we'll wrap it up. As a Mormon, what's Dan's goal to sow doubt? I have no idea. I would ask Dan that question. It is kind of strange. I have seen him attacked a lot by even Mormon apologists. They're just like, they don't necessarily like him.
I'm friends with Jacob.
Jacob Hansen.
Yeah, and he doesn't really. He's not a Dan fan either.
No, I don't know. I don't know. He does though, probably because he's so objective and all that other stuff. So
it seems politically motivated, if you ask me.
Well, according to Dan, men can breastfeed. So there you go. Like, he says a lot of crazy stuff.
Really?
He does. Look, it's on Twitter. He's tweeted it multiple times. Oh,
I need my protein, Eric.
You're not the right kind of man. You're not the right kind of man, Dan. You're not one of those men.
I'm not man enough.
You're not that kind of. You're not that kind of man. Yeah. So, I mean, we are seeing it with the atheist civil war. There is a lot of political motivation that seems to be kind of dividing them right now. So
yes.
Anyway. All right. Well, thanks everybody for signing on. I hope this was helpful, and we will see you in the next one.